for Envato, and we're going to talk about a day in the life of a purchase on our marketplace. Of course, it's not working. Okay, so before I get started, I'll just a little bit about myself. I'm an infrastructure developer at Envato. I've been there for about 5 years. I'm also an AWS certified solutions architect at the pro level, and I've been lucky enough for the past 2 years to be part of the AWS Cloud Warriors program here in Australia. Okay, a little bit about Envato. We're a Melbourne company. We're a network of digital marketplaces, so we connect content creators with buyers. So we have 7 marketplaces where we sell WordPress themes, audio, video, 3D models, things like that. We're pretty busy. We do, on a good day, 50 million page views. It's powered by an 11-year-old monolithic Rails app that's starting to change. We have a new React front end that we're starting to move our traffic over to. We have about 500 employees based all over the world, in almost, not every country, but quite a few. You can work from anywhere. That's one of our company policies. So we have people all over Australia. There's a guy in Bali who works there permanently, and like I say, the US, Europe, Asia, Australia, everywhere. So, I'm going to tell a story, try and make the presentation a little more interesting. So our audience for our site is generally creative professionals, people who are building websites and content for clients. So we're going to start out with a creative professional who's designing an e-commerce website for a client of theirs. They're going to use WordPress, and so they head over to themeforest.net, which happens to be our WordPress marketplace, and it's one of the it's in the top 200 Alexa sites in the world, so it's quite busy. It's our busiest marketplace. So they're going to pop their browser over, to point the browser over to themeforest.net, and the first stop is not AWS. The point of this presentation is talking about AWS, but our first stop is actually Cloudflare. We use Cloudflare for a number of things. They offer DNS hosting, CDN services, DDoS protection, some of the best DDoS protection in the world, and a whole bunch of other things. And we use them as our front door. So all the requests that come through first meet the bouncer there, and it checks for things like IP reputation, bad or fake user agents, looks for bots, who has a whole bunch of firewall rules and filters and things like that, known threats. And in this case, the IP reputation of the browser might be what Cloudflare considers suspect, and so it'll issue a JavaScript challenge, which happens to be an extremely complicated mathematical equation that is easy for a computer to solve, and the more untrustworthy that Cloudflare thinks your IP address is, or a bunch of other metadata it looks at, the harder the challenge is, to the point where if it thinks you're a bot, it will give you an unsolvable challenge. In this case, our browser says the answer is 7. It's probably not 7, but the bouncer says okay, and we get through. And now we get into AWS land. So this is our front-end application. It serves the home page. And we go through a whole number of AWS services, starting with Route 53, the DNS service. Everything's in a VPC. We use the AWS WAF to control, to provide a little bit of control over access control based on the client. So we control who can talk to the load balancers. And then we have using the application load balancer talking to an ECS cluster. And on there we're running Nginx as a reverse proxy and a Node.js application that powers the React front end for the website. And that uses Elasticache and S3 to serve up all the content, plus there's a CloudFront distribution and S3 to serve up assets. So just to serve a home page is 9 AWS services. And there's the home page. Very exciting. So since we're we're a talented, creative professional. We know that our client might want their new e-commerce website to work on mobile as well as desktop. And so we will use the search to find a responsive theme so that it works seamlessly on mobile. And so that takes us into the search system. The search system starts in the same place, goes through Cloudflare, but then it takes a different path through our infrastructure, and it goes through a classic load balancer instead of an application level load balancer. This is some of our older infrastructure, and it's maybe a bit legacy. It goes through, it's actually containers running on bare EC2 instances, and rather than ECS. ECS didn't exist at the time this was built. And it's powered by an Elasticsearch cluster. And that's the search results page. Again, very exciting. There are 6,000 responsive e-commerce themes, far too many to look through. So we'll just look at the first one. And it takes us to the item details page. And this gets into the meat of the 11-year-old Rails application. Again, Route 53, WAF, and an application load balancer. And something interesting here is it uses the application load balancer's path-based routing to decide which of the many origins we have to send the request to. We have the Sharpfront system, we have search systems, and then we have actually our webs kind of sharded into different groups based on use case. So for people that actually are managing the content, they go to a different set of web servers than the people that are looking to buy stuff. So the ALB directs the users to our customer web group, which is run by the Unicorn web server and a Rails application. And it is backed by a giant Aurora MySQL database that's got one writer and 2 read replicas to serve the ridiculous amount of traffic that we get. And it does so very seamlessly. We also have a couple of different Elasticache clusters. Being a Rails application, it uses memcache for caching individual rendered pages. It's called fragment caching, and also uses Redis to cache a bunch of metadata about requests. We also have EBS because it's EC2 instances, and we use the Elastic File System EFS, which is a Amazon version of NFS, to share some files that have to be available in constant time to all the application servers. And so the app renders an item details page. You can see the 3 pages that's on the home page, the search results, and the item details page all have a consistent look and feel, but they're served by completely different tiers of the application. So we found that item, we decided we'll buy it. We go through a payment flow. So I've omitted a bunch of the same stuff we've talked about already. Still going through the Rails application, through the application load balancer. We go through a payment process, and we don't want to have anything to do with other people's credit cards. We don't want to have to worry about PCI compliance, so we hand that off to a payment gateway, an external payment gateway like PayPal or Braintree. They deal with the money, and it comes back to us, shows us that the person's paid, and we use Cloudfront to deliver the item download using a signed URL, which is good for 10 minutes. And that way we can all of our items are available in an S3 bucket that is not publicly accessible, protected by an origin access identity, which is an S3 construct that lets you restrict access to items through a Cloudfront or S3 signed URL. And it also, you can see here also our SSO or identity system, which uses a number of other systems, mostly EC2 and KMS to encrypt session secrets and such. That's the flow of a purchase on the market. This is our kind of our monitoring suite. We do use CloudWatch for native AWS metrics, but we have them all pushed into Datadog. Plus, we send a lot of custom metrics to Datadog because it gives us a huge level of flexibility that CloudWatch doesn't. We can build into our alerts. We can actually build complete runbooks on what an alert actually means, how to deal with it, how to solve it. So when you wake up at 3 in the morning, you don't get an alert saying that the latency on your ELB is too high. You get a workbook that tells you every step you need to do to troubleshoot it and how to solve it, which, again, at 3 in the morning is a pretty awesome thing to have. We also use Rollbar for application level error reporting, Pingdom for checking our application uptime across the world, New Relic for application performance monitoring, and then there's a bunch of standard AWS tools, config, CloudTrails, Trusted Advisor, let you keep an eye on your application. And as far as logging goes, we have too many logging systems. We started out with Splunk, which is really nice, but very, very expensive. And we built our own ELK cluster, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. But that is equally expensive and hard to manage yourself. So we've opted to throw them all away and go with Sumo Logic, which is a SaaS product that doesn't quite cost as much, and they manage it for you. And we're in the midst of getting there, but so we're at the worst place where we have 3 to 4 different systems all having their own ingestion pipelines and technologies. So hopefully that slide will collapse soon. Deployments. Oh, the slide doesn't look very good. Deployments and provisioning. So we do everything using infrastructure as code principles. So everything, we use CloudFormation for almost everything, but we don't write native CloudFormation. We write using a Ruby DSL called Sparkle Formation, which has a stupid name, but we have an open source tool called Stackmaster that compiles the Sparkle Formation templates into raw JSON for CloudFormation, and it lets you use Ruby expressions to build up templates, makes them very modular, and you can create quite complicated stacks that cross-reference each other. So you can take an output of one stack and wire it into the input on another one. And so you can build yourself really complicated cross-connected stacks, which isn't always a good thing, but that's our technology for building out infrastructure. We also have a couple of systems that use Terraform, mostly for our Cloudflare infrastructure, because not being AWS, it doesn't support CloudFormation. We use BuildKite for our CI system, which happens to be another Melbourne company. And BuildKite uses the AWS SDKs to push out our deployments. We also use a tool from Zendesk, another Melbourne company, called Simpson, which is a deployment tool. And it's very similar to BuildKite. They're kind of glorified script runners that have a bunch of nice features around them about logging and inspection. But effectively, they all do the same thing, and they run scripts and use AWS SDK tools and code deploy to push out applications to our running infrastructure. And I couldn't find a home for the rest of those. They're all other AWS services that we use. There's a little running count that's getting cut off on the count, but that's 44. So 44 AWS services for this one product, or this one Envato product that we run. We use about that many services, give or take. There's a couple missing, but that runs one of the busiest Rails applications in the world. Busier than Basecamp, who happens to be the company that created Rails and who it was created for. That's us. That's my presentation. We have, I brought along Anthony and Sergio and Luke, all developers or managers at Envato, and we brought some swag that's on the back of the table there if you'd like to pick something up. And we are hiring. We'll have a talk in the marketplace section in a minute. But feel free to come and talk to any of us if you have any questions.
All right, so since we have about 20 minutes, do you have any questions now? Any areas you like to yourself? No? Yeah.
Are you using nested stacks as well in the stack sets and the chain sets?
We do use chain sets, so we never interact with CloudFormation directly anymore. The Stackmaster tool that I mentioned does all of our CloudFormation interaction, and it does support chain sets. So when you apply a stack, it compiles the Ruby and the parameters into a JSON file and then passes it through. You can see like a diff of the actual JSON template, and then you see the output of a change set. So it'll show you all the pending changes, and you can then accept it or stop. And we have that for some projects. We have that wired into BuildKite, our CI system, so that it merge into the master branch. Will automatically deploy it with a kind of a manual yes/no step.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
Sorry, mate. If I'm not mistaken, I noted that you're using Cloudflare, but most of your environment is in AWS. What is the takeaway of using Cloudflare? I mean, why not CloudFront?
Good question. AWS does have they do have a number of products around that do similar things to Cloudflare. So they have, like say, CloudFront is the CDN. They have Shield and Shield Advanced, which is a DDoS protection product. We spent about a year moving from Akamai, which is a similar platform, to Cloudflare, and as part of that, we did about a 6-month exploration into which was the best platform to pick, and Akamai, Cloudflare, and AWS were on the short list. And the AWS services at the time, which was about a year ago, were not mature enough for our needs. So Shield is fairly new. For those who don't know, Shield Basic is a product. It's not really a product. It's just something you get working with Amazon, and they don't want DDoS attacks on their networks because it costs them money, and so they will block layer 3 kind of volumetric attacks at the edge networks for you. And if you're using ELB or CloudFront or WAF, you get a whole bunch more, not control, but you get a lot more blocking capabilities, and they will work with you to help block. And if there's a pay product called Shield Advanced, where you actually get a console that will help you be protected from DDoS attacks, and you have a 15-minute on-call engineer that will, if you are under attack, you can call them to get help. They do offer that, but their stack is at the time wasn't comparable to what Cloudflare offered feature-wise. So Cloudflare has I think the largest DNS network on the planet. I think they advertise that they handle 30% of the DNS traffic in the world, and they have very, very fast, very capable DNS infrastructure. And their DDoS protection is much more capable than Shield's. It was a year ago. I'm not sure. We haven't kept track too closely with what Shield Advanced offers today, but in terms of bot detection, prevention, and layer 4 application level and layer 7 attacks, the Cloudflare product is much more capable. So it's a funny thing to have on an AWS presentation that we're not using their products in that area, but at the time it was a better choice for us.
Do you use any AWS infrastructure for SSL certificate management and deployment?
Yes. Is it there? Yep. So right there on the left is ACM, AWS Certificate Manager. So most of our SSL is actually handled by Cloudflare. So anytime when you want to use their DDoS protection, they do the SSL offloading themselves. They have to be able to inspect the traffic. So for most of our public-facing sites, Cloudflare is doing the offload, but we still run between Cloudflare and our origins, because it goes over the public internet. We run SSL on all of our origins, and we use ACM to do all the certificates for that.
Mine is also around Cloudflare. So in terms of home use, for example, is it ethical or is it economical to actually apply Cloudflare to your home routers?
Economically, yes. So Cloudflare has a free plan. I can't remember what all you get. You don't get the same set of features. We're paying a lot of money for the enterprise level Cloudflare offering, which obviously you get a lot more features than the free plan. But you do, with the free one, I think you get some DNS hosting, and you get their basic level of DDoS protection. So,
Cool.
so yeah, for a personal site, it's free and you can use it.
And does that apply to mobile devices as well?
So they're using your mobile device as a client. If you set up a web server on AWS, you could stick Cloudflare in front, and everybody who accesses your site would benefit from that. Is that what you're asking? Or?
I'm thinking more about cybersecurity and protection standpoint because I've been affected by it. So obviously I look for ways to protect myself around that.
I don't think using Cloudflare to front your like a personal website would do anything for you using your mobile device as a client. But Cloudflare is doing a lot of work on advancing internet security in general. So they offer their own DNS hosting service, much like OpenDNS or Google. They run 1.1.1.1 is a DNS server, and they're starting to change how people use DNS publicly. So you can use it over HTTPS now, which protects you from people spoofing DNS entries or observing your DNS. I happen to run that at home just in a lab environment for fun. So all of my DNS queries that leave my house are encrypted over TLS going to Cloudflare.
Cool. Thanks.
Sure.
Any more questions, guys? Yeah.
So in your history, has DDoS been a problem of your site?
Yes, not a whole lot, but we've had 4 or 5 probably notable incidents. One, in fact, the trigger for us moving to Cloudflare was we had about an 8-hour DDoS, a targeted layer 7 DDoS attack. And our previous provider, which I already mentioned, couldn't help us. Like I say, it took 8 hours to get around it. And so we went looking for a more competent product. So we've been the target of DDoS attacks a few times, but they're very costly when they happen. So, yeah.
Any more questions? Yep.
Is your site still growing? Is the traffic still trending upwards? Is it a fairly static type environment now? You've pretty much solved all the problems, or?
I wouldn't say we've solved all the problems, but it goes up and down in terms of traffic volume, because our users are people on the public internet, and their wants and desires change. Sometimes desires for WordPress themes are up, and sometimes they're not. So it fluctuates. We have a BI team that keeps track of that kind of stuff and generates reports and things like that. Does that answer your question, or are you asking something?
Yeah, and just with respect to the application itself, is that a fairly stable app, or are new features being added, which you have to incorporate into the solution?
There are new features added to the Rails app. Not very often. We have a little bit of a manifesto, and when you submit a PR for that application, you have to explain why you're doing it and why what you're adding belongs there. Because it is a giant monolith that's old, a lot of legacy code in there, we're actively working to try and pull concerns out rather than put more in. But yes, we are still adding features on a daily to weekly basis to it.
Thanks.
Any more questions, guys?
This isn't really an architecture question, so maybe you have to say pass, but you mentioned earlier that you outsource kind of handling of all the payments to Braintree. Is there anything you can say about how you handle working out GST and VAT and stuff? Do you do that, or is that part of what they do for you?
We do that. I don't work on the finance team, so I don't know all of the details, but I know that we spend an inordinate amount of time tracking which countries users are from, and what tax rate applies, because it's a transaction. It's actually not a transaction with Envato per se. It's a transaction between the content creator and the buyer, and so the two countries that they are located in dictate how much tax the buyer has to pay and how much the content creator has to pay. So there's a whole tax team and a couple of products that our identity team manage that figure out that store details about where users and sellers are located and what the tax rates are. And withholding tax. We are a Melbourne company, but we're a U.S. entity as well, and so we have a bunch of tax obligations from the U.S. And in terms of withholding taxes and things like that. So I know it's very complicated, and we have to do all of it. I think we hand off the totals effectively to Braintree and PayPal and the other payment gateways to do their things.
Cool. So I have a question. Where in that all of the diagrams you've had is your biggest pain point, and what areas are you looking to improve next?
Biggest pain point. I think the fact that it's a monolith isn't really a pain point in and of itself, but the fact that it's 11 years old and it's a Rails code base, those two facts are a little bit of a pain. So it's our CEO was a Flash developer, and 11 years ago, he couldn't figure out anywhere to sell his Flash wares, and so he built the first one of our marketplaces, which doesn't exist anymore, and kind of over the years cloned them all within a single application. So all those 7 marketplace sites are powered by one app. And as you can imagine, one code base that's 11 years old has got a lot of cruft and stuff in it. And because it was a startup, not all the decisions might have been the most well-researched, especially back in the beginning. And so, for example, our modeling around attachments, the model of what people are selling, how it works on the back end is pretty terrible. And it works. It's accreted over time, and it works. And so we haven't rebuilt that. But when changes need to be made there, it's quite a painful process. There's touch points to that stuff throughout this giant code base. I can't remember how many lines of code, but hundreds of thousands. And we do have a gigantic test suite. We only run it in CI because it takes hours to run on a puny little laptop. But again, tens of thousands of tests. So touching that stuff is probably one of the biggest pain points. Is working on that legacy code and trying to figure out how to extract it out one day and replace it with more well thought out, more well modeled code. So our pain points are not infrastructure related usually.
So what area are you looking at next for improvement? Is just refactoring that?
We're working on changing the business model a little bit. There's another component to our site called Elements, which is it's not the 7 sites that you were looking at there. It's a subscription model, and so from a business perspective, we're shifting making a lot of effort to push the Elements model, and so we've got a lot of developers working on that, and it's selling a lot of the same items, but that's a brand new platform, and it's built from the ground up with a lot of good ideas and good modeling going on. Having said that, we're investing a lot in security and hardening the infrastructure and making it more resilient. So at the moment, one of the downsides to this infrastructure is it all runs out of US East 1, and were there a meltdown there, along with probably every other company on the planet, we would be in big trouble. So we're working on some resiliency, but again, going back to the fact that it's a very old application and a Rails application specifically, which puts very specific stress on the database. It's not easy to serve it out of multiple locations concurrently. So there's a big push for what we call macro resiliency, being able to keep our site up in the event of downtime on part of AWS or Cloudflare and other our dependent systems.
Cool. Were there any other questions, guys?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I didn't see any fraud detection in terms of your payment system. So how do you deal with fraud?
That isn't in the slides. We have a fraud team, and they, to be honest, I don't know a lot about the fraud system. Some of it is in-house, some of it is outsourced. So there's a company called Count with K, and they offer fraud detection as a service, and we use them plus a lot of in-house code to to detect and deal with fraud. So, and being a big marketplace, we deal with a fair amount of fraud. We constantly are blocking users based on their actions or requests from countries that we're not legally allowed to serve, things like that. So it didn't show in there. There's actually these slides are kind of the marketplace centric view. There's a lot of back end that doesn't appear here.
Thanks.
What version of Rails are you using?
5.2. We just went from 5.1 to 5.2. There's a roadmap plan to prepare for 6.
Any more questions, guys? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.